Good afternoon, everybody. Uh, Welcome to the afternoon panel discussion. We have a very interesting topic with us today, uh, privacy and digital financial inclusion. Over the years, we've seen a lot of innovation happening in the area of digital in the financial sector. And there's always been a question in terms of balancing of interests with respect to privacy and enabling financial innovation. We have a very esteemed panel with us today. First off, I'd like to invite on stage Saranya Gopinath, who is the co-founder of DICE, which is the Digital India Collective for Empowerment. We have Mr. Dharmendra Jam, who is the Vice President of Paytm. We have Benny Chug, who would be moderating the discussion. She is a research manager at Dwara Research. Unfortunately, Rahul Rajendra Prasad from HDFC Bank couldn't join us today. We wish him a speedy recovery. Over to you, Benny.
Thank you, Anand. Good afternoon, everybody. And on behalf of the DSCI, I welcome you all to FinSec 2021. The theme that we're discussing on today's panel is privacy and financial innovation. Can we really achieve both goals? I already have introduced the panel to you, so without much ado, I'll kick off the panel with some opening comments. Can I turn to you first, Dharmendra, please? We've heard a lot about how data is the game changer, how it is the new oil, how it is absolutely essential for innovation. But does this innovation come at a cost? And is really the tension between privacy and financial innovation as we see it absolute and non-resolvable?
Thanks a lot, Benny, for your introduction. And thanks, Anand, for the introduction part. So, first of all, there is no either or in terms of data and security, or data or inclusion or financial inclusion. I would like to tell you that the growth that this country has seen in last 5 years. I'll give you example of like UPI, which was launched in August 2016. Now we are sitting in April 2021, and number of transactions which has increased. In March month, it clocked 2.73 billion number of transactions, worth value of more than 5 lakh crore, which is phenomenal. And this country has seen such a high growth only because there was sufficient regulations, sufficient systems, and all ecosystem, the all stakeholders and ecosystem came together to protect data, to ensure privacy of the user, and uh, the frauds and any other type of leakages is also limited. That is the reason that customers or people have shown trust in digital payments, and they are using it, and it is growing month on month basis at such a high pace. So this is something at Paytm or as overall industry, it is a trend that it's not either an or, that data or the financial inclusion or the financial access. Both go all like hand in hand. And also just one more point I like to say that see, tier one and tier two cities we have penetrated. Now we are moving to the tier three and below cities. We have also penetrated there, but not that deeply as we have done in tier one and tier two. There may be first time users. It's responsibility of the platforms or the financial institutions to ensure that first time users are aware about the various security aspects. It's essential that we make them aware that do not share their credentials with anyone. We make them aware about the phishing patterns which are going on, so that they themselves are secure. And at Paytm platform, usually there are people who are first time users who may not have a bank account also. They are using Paytm. So it's our responsibility to ensure that sufficient security measures are there. They don't get into these privacy attacks or phishing attacks.
With hand-holding of first-time users. Saranya, if I turn to you, then where do you see this tension panning out?
Sure. First of all, thank you for that, Benny. And Good afternoon, everybody at DSCI. It's wonderful to join this esteemed panel on this very important topic. I think it's extremely pertinent to discuss today, and I'm sure it's top of mind for organizations such as Paytm and several fintech players across the industry, as well as think tanks and organizations such as yourself, Benny, such as Dwara, I'm sure, are also thinking about the same thing. So I think I completely agree, first off, with what Dharmender said. I think security and innovation cannot be perceived as an either or. That cannot be the case. And we can get into a little bit, in further detail as to situations where that not necessarily conflict, but where balancing those two may become important challenges. But I think I would agree with him that as far as definitely the ecosystem is concerned, the players are definitely not viewing it as an either or. Do not give one in place of the other. I think UPI as a wonderful example of an ecosystem or a financial innovation that has picked up in fantastic scale also stands good on multiple grounds, including the architecture of the system, which enables privacy, which the system is placed in such a way which enables privacy. You have the VPA, for example, the mobile format of it, which is the what you have and what you know. All of those systems and checks inherently allow for great privacy guidelines to be observed. Having said that, I would want to, because I have the ability of speaking to both of you today, I would want to nudge on another axis. So one is on the security practices, but on the other axis is how are we dealing with in terms of other privacy guidelines, which would seem more nuanced. And on another axis, financial innovation beyond payments. Which is beyond UPI, beyond credit card, debit card, innovation with regards to, and this is a ripe topic for the Indian fintech sector, because we've seen wonderful innovation in terms of lending, in terms of even savings products. Paytm as a bank with its wonderful reach has also tried engaging its customers across a variety of financial behavior. So if we take this further beyond security to larger privacy issues and take it beyond UPI payments to other financial innovation products, I think there is a conversation to be had, not in the terms of things have gone wrong, but where do we want to get to? Which are the best practices we want to get to, more than a rear view mirror, this is where we've gone wrong perspective. Because I don't think too many things have fallen off the wagon as far as that's concerned.
To get used to watchful panel. Sorry about that. But Saranya, if I can just pick up your brains then what are these issues beyond security that are concerns for privacy? Like what would come to mind?
I think now we are, kind of poking the bear as far as the larger ecosystem is concerned. I think data being widely available across a range of parameters for the individual, across a range of attributes for the individual, right from investors' valuation, that has been a component. Like having more data has contributed to get an organization getting higher valuations. The reason I bring that up is because the perception or the value of data is, has been given importance by multiple players in the. Sorry,
I can hear you.
Yeah, sorry. It's been given importance by multiple players in the ecosystem, and I don't think we can zero in on the player or the players individually as to why aren't these best practices observed, because I think there's also a bit of a chicken and egg situation as to if I am observing best practices, is my customer adequately appreciating that to be able to I'm going to be crude, and I'm sure the industry does not look at it this way, but the payout of this privacy observation, is the customer adequately appreciating it? If you're going to get docked on it in terms of a competing party, or in case of your investor, more importantly, the investor feels, no, you don't have every attribute of the customer on file, then your valuation is not going to be as high, is a source of tension right from the get-go, without even getting into what is the value add of each data set, how is it improving the product, how do we measure improvement and so on. I'm not even getting into that. I'm just saying right at the outset, there is a perception issue of more data means bigger company, means better company, means more investment. And until, and at an ecosystem level, that's at an investor, consumer, all of it. So until that basic perception is hit upon, I think moving the needle is going to take some Herculean effort by some of these parties. Somebody or the other has to go and do some heavy lifting to move this perception.
Great. And I'm going to hold that thought for later in the panel as well. I think I have a couple of questions of my own around that. For now, Dharmendra, I have a very basic question that if enterprises, especially the digital financial service providers, do go conservative on data collection, that is, if they collect fewer data types, if they kind of use lesser of data, does it necessarily impact the business adversely? Or are we now comfortable enough to know that exactly what kind of data we need, and therefore more data is necessarily not better?
Okay, that's very relevant question. First of all, I'd like to highlight a few regulations which are in place on data collection perspective. So first of all, as a policy, as a practice, it is necessary that companies collect only data which is needed. And we should not be collecting data for sake of collecting because customer has given us a consent to do so. We should be very much responsible because if there is no regulation or there is no restricting policy as of now on collection of specific data, then it doesn't mean that we collect it and we leverage it for any other purposes, maybe for benefit of customer itself. So as a principle, how it should be done, that's my view, that we should tell customer explicitly. There are two types of consent. One is implicit and explicit. Generic consent, you tell them that we'll be using your data for XYZ purposes at a broader level. We are not telling them exact services for which we are using their data.
Great.
And also the consent, this is one point more on this. So from the policy perspective, I believe that the consents which should be graded, and we should not be collecting data which is not required for direct services, maybe for many indirect services or sharing with the parent entities or sharing with the third parties. That practice should be avoided. That is, in principle, it's not correct. That's what I believe so.
Yeah. In fact, in our backstage conversation with Dharmendra, he made a very interesting point, which was to say that selling data to third parties is not really innovation. And I think that's a point that he's trying to kind of emphasize again, that innovation is something else. Innovation is necessarily product improvement and not just revenue generation. And therefore, using data for those purposes perhaps is what is relevant and called for. But even if there were data minimization in place, and if companies were kind of they didn't need an external incentive to collect only that which is relevant, and they were themselves conservative, of course just the normal length of business implies that we do end up collecting a lot of information, some of it personally sensitive information as well, just by the nature of providing financial services. So if I can just kind of go into those points, that just the act of collection of data does not automatically mean a breach of privacy, because there are tons of consumer protection safeguards that companies deploy to ensure that data is used wisely, judiciously as as well as in line with consumers' expectations. So Dharmendra, if I can turn to you first, if you could just take us through some of the consumer safeguards that you have in place at Paytm to protect users' privacy, even as you provide them convenient services.
Sure. So first of all, from the privacy perspective, I'll take example of the recent regulation that of TRI TCCPR to save consumers from the unsolicited commercial communication. What policy says that only the registered entities can send the commercial SMSs or bulk SMSs to anyone. Then registered header of those companies can only send. Then only specific templates uh, can be used for sending SMSs. The fourth layer of a security is that you can send commercial communication to only to those customers who have given you explicit OTP based consent. Then only you can send that communication to them. This is a practice. This is a regulation which which has been which was notified in July 2018, and it is being implemented. You might be seeing that recent news of OTP failures because of scrubbing of the SMSs by telcos. That is a implementation of this. That companies which have not onboarded on this platform of TRI, their SMSs are getting dropped. So from a protection perspective, Paytm has registered all of its header, all of its templates on this DLT-based, blockchain-based platform of TRI. That is a measure, and we have also very advanced stages of the next stage of the consent for only Paytm customers who have given us consent to receive SMSs for receiving promotional messages. Those will only get those messages. So we are at the advanced stage, which is extreme measure that we are caring about customers' privacy and not sending them unnecessary communication only because we have their phone number, only because they have transacted on our platform. That's part one. Then we have, uh, in terms of security layers, in terms of data protection layers, we have extensive mechanism for protecting the customer data, the layers of encryption which has been included, and also we have, after onboarding a customer, we collect the minimal data, very minimal data as part of KYC, which is required to be collected. Only need to know principle we follow. We even sometimes we even do not take basic minimal information. I was telling you I'll tell you one incident where gender of that particular set of customers were not taken. The team said that no, we do not have it because we don't need it, because we don't distinguish basis gender. It's absolutely not necessary. And sometimes we have a convention, gender must be there. It is a basic information, but we even do not collect that because it's not required to serve our customers, because we do not distinguish our customers basis gender, basis any other. So that need to know principle is followed for minimal data collection at Paytm, which is something very unique that we do. And not only all these things, in terms of protection purposes, we provide many principles like deletion of your account, like which is part of EU GDPR principle and part of the draft personal data protection bill. So deletion of a customer account which is allowed, we we follow it very religiously, and it is available also. And lastly, I like to tell you that the languages, it's important that you, if you're making customer aware, you're talking their language. So our app is in 11 languages. So, and as we are deepening further to tier 3 and below cities, it's important that we increase our languages, number of languages, so that we are communicating customer about the privacy, about the security in their own language. That's essential. That is uniquely followed at Paytm app.
So, Dharmendra, these were some consumer-facing safeguards that you have, which is to say that make consent better, communicate in the language that the consumer understands, and do not collect more data than what you need. Are there any product level choices also that you come across that, where just gathering two more data points could perhaps lead to like higher revenue or better performance? And internally, how do you solve those dilemmas for yourself? Like, how does the organization itself weigh this trade-off between privacy and, say, revenue or innovation?
So first of all, I'd like to tell you that Paytm, there is no dilemma in between security and revenue. If it has to be secure, it's our responsibility to ensure that our customer data is secure enough. So there is no compromise in terms of revenue or business. So security comes first, privacy comes first. So there is no product choices which are made that this is a cheaper solution, so we should go ahead and buy it. Second point is the localization of our the customer data. So we truly adhere to the guidelines of RBI, where the customer data is stored in the country, localized in the country, and processed in the country. So all those uh, choices are made basis the localization of the consumer data as well as. So answer to your first question is that product choices are independent of the security or the level of security. The best product in security is chosen because of the security advantages.
Sure.
I hope I have answered your
Yes,
question.
yeah, that's very helpful. Saranya, a similar question to you, but maybe a broader industry trend. Where do you see the consciousness of privacy rising amongst providers? What's the big trend, and what do you think are the biggest challenges that they're facing in making privacy topmost priority if it's not already?
Yeah, no, absolutely. First of all, I have to, as I will at every given point, I completely appreciate the efforts taken by Paytm in making sure to observe privacy. It's a very nuanced point of why do you need to collect gender in the provision of financial services. And I think that lens, as more and more organizations adopt it, that's where we are going to move the needle. And like I said earlier, it's going to require an extra effort by some party of the ecosystem. We can't keep waiting for somebody else to take the first call. Organizations showing leadership in ensuring privacy, even when, while a privacy bill is pending in Parliament, taking that step and observing best practices in privacy is really where we'd like to see the ecosystem go. So that's fantastic on its own. As far as where the industry perspective and what their appreciation is, again, the distinction between what I broadly call security and privacy becomes abundantly comes into focus. I think security practices, it's a constant challenge globally. As far as the hacking world is concerned, whether it's government, whether it's a financial institution or a bank, nobody is exempt. And it's a constant cat and mouse game of, build a 10-foot wall, they get an 11-foot ladder, and so on and so forth. So I don't think it's on any one organization. What I would love to see, and is more conferences such as this, where there can be a lot more, sharing of experiences, saying if this is where currently the benchmark is, we know that there are XYZ ethical hackers who have raised the bar, and so we need to get our game better. I think at that level, and definitely this is an industry body perspective, seeing more of this kind of constructive collaboration of, kind of exchanging notes and seeing where can we, if we have found, an ethical hacker we have been subjected to and we've been able to help ourselves this way, this is a note to be shared with the industry and everybody can learn from it. I think I would like to see more of those practices, because that's just on the security level, where it's unambiguously everybody's reading of the same hymn book. Security is, first and foremost, and more so in an industry like fintech, which is so vibrant in our country specifically, right? So that is unequivocal. On the other end, when we're talking about privacy, when you're talking about, let's say, observing principles of data minimization, purpose limitation, that is a little more nuanced, where the consumers or the customers observing it and having a better appreciation for it is definitely encouraging, even for companies and organizations, to take that leap of faith and say, yes, we will observe these best practices, which is a large scale exercise in any country across the world. Right now, the perspective of privacy, and more so in our Indian population, a violation of privacy, if you ask a layperson, and I stand to be corrected on this, this is from a lot of anecdotal studies. If you ask somebody, okay, do you care about privacy? They may say yes. But if you ask them why you care about privacy, it ends up becoming a security concern, which is, oh, if my OTP goes, I will lose money or something of that sort. That is really where the perception of privacy largely still is. We haven't got to the point where the everyday man will have a perception of, oh, if there is a violation of privacy, I could be profiled for votes like Cambridge Analytica, or I could be profiled to have, let's say, a higher insurance premium or something of that sort. That profiling concern of loss of privacy, which is, or of abuse of data management practices in the hands of the organization to whom you have provided your data, or in the hands of a third party to whom that data may be shared, those concerns of loss of privacy in those nuanced ways, beyond just a security concern, has not adequately percolated the average consumer. And that is understandable, because it feels a little far-fetched, and how do you even identify it if that is to happen, and so on and so forth. So I think there are multiple reasons why that's not currently the case. But in short of that, until and unless consumers are getting into the nuances of, I care about privacy for these XYZ reasons, that I should not get a higher insurance premium than the market standard, and so on and so forth, it is still going to devolve upon organizations to take leadership, to educate consumers on this, or to get into just adopt best practices, irrespective of whether the consumer asks for it or not. I think really that's where we are going to go, because then you get into a conversation of the negotiating part of the consumer, and so on and so forth. Either which way, the ultimate end point is, if consumers can appreciate it, that's an encouragement, but that's not the driving tool. Ultimately, the driving tool has to come from leadership at an organizational industry level, and definitely when buttressed by a regulatory framework, puts everybody on the same footing. Sure. So then, everybody is just moving forward in the conversation at large.
Yeah. And to your mind, Saranya, have you seen any examples of these early steps, or, in your imagination, what is some of these steps that the leadership can themselves take in fair use of data?
Yeah, no, I think there have been a couple of steps. Like, for example, Zoho last year, when we took very brave stance, saying that, we are going to take privacy observing practices. We're not going to allow for trackers on any of our websites. I think that was a global first. And it was really stood out for it. And it was as recent as last year. So everybody's cautiously optimistic about that. And, it sounds great. You have to, see where it goes, but we're all rooting for it to work, obviously. And from multiple metrics, right? From whether it works for you as a business, whether consumers are looking at it, and so on and so forth. It's an audaciously wonderful experiment, which we're all hoping for works out best. Having said that, we are, in the fintech space, it's definitely a much more nuanced argument. While we are still pushing for, organizations such as Paytm, which have a large consumer bandwidth, we are looking for the next step in product customization. So we are, and that's when the real conversation of tension really arises. When we are trying to get to more tailor-made loan products for, let's say, a salaried person versus somebody who's working in the unorganized sector, a loan product needs to change substantially. And Dwara, I'm sure I'm preaching to the choir as far as this is concerned. So I think that kind of distinction needs to be made. Now, very clearly, that cannot happen without a more vivid understanding of the consumer herself, whether or not she's a salaried person or so on and so forth. That appreciation is fundamental to creating products which best suit her. And that's when the conversation really starts, which is much more nuanced, which is not the same as tracker on, tracker off. But I am going to create a product which will make your life substantially better and tailored for you. For that, I'm going to need this much. I don't need this much. I only need 5 more attributes, not 6, is up to a call of the organization. And I think that tension is something which the organizations will need to take leadership on, as I mentioned. But also in having these conversations where, the layperson, as a consumer, I would love to understand more about the measures taken by such organizations, have a better appreciation for it. And that's when the needle moves forward, even from a growth perspective.
Sure. And Dharmendra, I think that is the question that you perhaps are also juggling at Paytm with, because your recent foray into loans would require more variety of data, if I understand correctly, as opposed to just a payment services, even though those loans are in partnership with NBFCs. So, are you now looking to develop policies that basically, you mentioned graded consent sometime back, but are you also then looking at graded usage of data for different financial use types, like you need more data for perhaps credit and lesser data for payments, and how do you make sure that that data is used fairly when you're giving out credit? Have those questions come your way yet?
Okay. First of all, lending piece, you may be aware that Paytm offers lending, and the lending model which is developed by Paytm is basis many variables. So one of the variable is, of course, our internal activity, how much active a Paytm user is, what kind of transaction that consumer is indulging in. Basis that we develop model, and there are other many other parameters that we take into consideration while developing that lending model. So it's we should appreciate, because through the lending apps, the structured lending apps who have been doing this due diligence and following all the procedures, the appreciation should be given to them, because these lending platforms are giving loan to merchants, to individuals who otherwise couldn't have received loan from the structured institutions. Okay, that is one thing. And lending is one arm which drives the financial inclusion. I would, I'm a personally, I believe that lending is the key which will drive financial inclusion in this country, because lending is an unsolved problem as of now. Payment will not drive, because payment is a problem, I understand, but lending, uh, in next 5 years, today we have at certain level of financial inclusion. In next 5 years, I believe that lending, if we solve the lending problems at the last mile for MSMEs, giving them loans basis innovative models and at decent interest rates, and working on developing models not only basis particular set of data which is used by bank, but finding out other ways based, such as cash flow based lending, and which have been used globally. It's not like UK uses very innovative aspects. Like I give you example that some countries are using the models like telecom usage, how much frequent telecom user you are. That means you are better, or how much you are active socially. This is also an indicator. So people have moved too far in developing models to decide whether loan should be given to that person or to institution or not. And we, as from the lending perspective, also look forward to develop such models, so that our lending services reach to the unlended or unbanked segment, people who have not used banking services also. So this is something which is, uh, we believe in, that financial inclusion, the remaining set of the financial inclusion would be driven by lending, particularly digital lending. You're mute. You're on mute.
Amazing. For a while now, we've been looking at digital financial lenders to kind of help us reach the underserved. I think the question there is that more than conventional banks, it's the digital lenders who are faced with this dilemma of, privacy versus kind of reaching the last mile. Because this is precisely the problem that they're trying to solve. When many kind of last mile borrowers get rejected by bigger institutions, it's usually due to lack of financial information. And then comes agile digital lender who's able to actually make use of all kinds of diverse information to create a financial picture of the borrower and see what they're worth and help them actually access loans. It's there that I think this tension between privacy and financial innovation comes out live, I think, in more ways than it does in payments. So, how do you see, do you have already thought of internal protocols, data minimization principles, or privacy audits going ahead when you also create these lending models? Like these algorithms, do you plan to audit them for privacy or other measures to kind of safeguard for privacy even as they reach the last mile?
Yeah, sure. So, see, it's all the usage of. See, there are two part of it that you are developing an innovative model, and you need data for it. And there are primary sources of data, and there are secondary sources of data. I give you some examples, like good example of digital locker. That is an innovative product of Government of India, wherein as there are many banks which are registered there. There are two parts of digital locker. One is the issuer and one is user. Like CBSE issues your 10th and 12th mark sheets and actually issues it on digital locker. Many universities are issuing their degrees on digital locker. You can directly go and download it from here. Now, we as a country, we may look forward to use digital locker as an instrument where and those documents are only used if customer is giving you Aadhaar based consent to use those documents, and it's graded use. Customer can decide that you can use my 10th 12th, you can use my salary certificate if employers are generating as a futuristic scenario, and your bank statement. Suppose banks start issuing your bank statements on digital locker, and whenever you are applying for lending, then the lending institution gets access to all those documents with customer's consent, and then only, and for a particular purpose only. It's not like it's a generic consent. You can use that information only for the purpose of decision making for the lending given to that customer or not, or loan given to that customer or not. So that is one source which is being used as a secondary source of data for developing lending models. Now, if it is customer has not given its consent to use any data, then in principle it should not be used. In principle, it has to be purpose or consent, which is purpose specific consent, explicit OTP based consent, rather than just a 100-page document and there is a one checkbox at the bottom that I agree to that consent, and then you've asked everything to be taken from that customer. So we totally think that the consent has to be graded, consent has to be specific, consent has to be explicit and purpose driven consent, rather than a generic consent which has no purpose. Like, it's like take it or leave it. If you don't give us consent, then you are not eligible to use any services. Rather than there should be graded services that if you give this much services consent, then you are able to use all these services. But that is not available as of now. So in purpose, answering to your last like specific question, the last line is that the lending decision data should be used by of customer only basis his consent for this specific purposes, and that is what is being done at Paytm.
Started with this conversation, but we're very close to time. I have time for one final question to the both of you. Sarina has been quiet for a while, so go first. Do you think that in the years to come, there would be product differentiation based on privacy, and consumers would actually vote for privacy protecting products?
Right. I mean, yes and no. I think that's the utopian next step that we want it. We want the industry to go to. But I also know that as a larger population, the gap between demand and supply is so huge that in the absence of negotiating power on the hands of the consumer, when they are right now, let's say lending is a wonderful example. Right now, you take whatever loan comes to you or whatever loan you are available with, because that in itself is a huge step forward for you. And that's a large part of the country. In that position, will they be able to say, no, I reject you because you are not providing privacy observing techniques versus another one? I don't know. I don't know anybody who has the ability to do that. Having said that, that looks hopefully like a non problem because of just the vibrancy of our market and the number of competitors. So because there is adequate competition, because there is such an untapped market to address, with more players coming into place, a differentiator will be made on multiple axes and on service, on the kind of engagement, and definitely privacy will be a factor. If things just continue on the trajectory that they currently are, and to the Dharmendra's point of granularity of consent and opt-ins instead of opt-outs, having those practices, which is very basic, having them already in place is good, because then the product differentiator and privacy, that place also becoming competitive is really what I'd like to see.
Sure. Dharmendra, to you, can we expect Paytm to start differentiating itself on the basis of the privacy protections they provide the consumer?
No, differentiating itself basis. Sorry, I didn't get your last.
The high quality privacy protections that they afford to the consumer, in addition to the financial services, of course.
No, see, Paytm. I'll give you some example, because as a brand, we are used by almost like we have 40 crore plus trusted customers and approximately 2 crore merchants. And this is something which is most used, one of the most used app in this country. And if we wouldn't have been very much vigilant on the security needs of our customers, this growth and the sustained growth that we have achieved till date wouldn't be possible. Because please understand that customer does financial transaction on only an app which is considered as secure. That's a first parameter. Of course, ease of use and all those principles come, but having trust, so security is of paramount importance to us. We do not distinguish between customer spaces security. It's everybody as it at equal security level, and we keep on keep making people aware that about the phishing attacks, about attacks which is possible to anyone. Let it be a small merchant or a very big enterprise. Anybody is few clicks away from the phishing attack. They can be attacked. So we keep on making, so one distinguish, I would say the point which we do is keeping our customers aware about any kind of phishing attack, any kind of attacks which are or patterns which are ongoing, and making them aware. That is something which is very, very important for us, that people should not dupe anyone. This is our name. That's important for us. So that's why awareness is our main focus.
Okay. Thanks both Dharmendra and Saranya. As just closing comments, before I close actually, I do have 4 versions of a very similar question, which is, can we use AI to detect cybersecurity attacks? I have 4 versions of the same question. Some ask about the algorithms, specific algorithms that can help detect cybersecurity attacks. Others, how effective AI is in detecting cybersecurity attacks. But usually, if I can field it to both my panelists, what is the future of AI in helping or averting cybersecurity attacks? Do you guys think it's promising? Maybe Saranya first and then Dharmendra.
Sure. No, absolutely. I mean, I'll give to Dharmendra for the lion's share of this because I'm sure as an organization they have a closer perspective. But the short version is AI is already being deployed in assessing fraud situations, not just in cybersecurity, but like, for example, in the GST platform uses AI to evaluate fraudulent transactions on the GST platform. So that's not even contemplating, let's say, payment transactions and so on and so forth. But let's say because there is a substantial social engineering component as part of fraud as well, it requires a consumer also to be vigilant and certain interventions over there. So yes, AI is very effective obviously as it is deployed well. It's a tool after all, so it depends on how it's being deployed and who deploys it appropriately. Is it effective when deployed? Yes. Can it be the silver bullet to solve all fraud? As it stands today, not really.
Dharmendra, very quickly, I just have 15 seconds. I'm really sorry about this.
So AI and machine learning both are extensively being used to detect fraudulent transaction, fraudulent accounts, identification of hotspots, identification of the particular merchants, identification of particular pin codes which are source of the fraudulent transactions or attacks. So this is well implemented, extensively used in fraud prevention measures in the industry, I would say. Not only at Paytm, but in industry.
Okay. As closing comments, the panelists on the panel think that if they had their way, they would definitely not want a trade-off between privacy and financial innovation. Empirical economists now suggest that actually there are diminishing returns to data, which is to say that empirically we're closer to establishing that more data is not always better. So perhaps it's just a matter of learning curve and quantities that we as financial service providers also hit the plateau and find that we don't necessarily need more data for more financial innovation. As a consumer advocate, my research also finds out that consumers are actually willing to prefer privacy preserving products. There was some research that CGAP did with I want to say Echo in India, where consumers actually were willing to pay a small privacy premium to make sure that the payment services that they availed of were actually privacy protecting. Similarly, low-income households in Kenya and Ghana have actually exhibited willingness to pay for privacy protecting loans. This is not to say that consumers should be made to pay for a thing that's their right, which is right to privacy, but it is to say that sooner than later there would be enough consumer demand demanding privacy preserving products. And if the panelists on this panel are any suggestion, then the providers are willing to cater to it. Thank you, everybody. This was a great panel.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I think we covered a whole host of different important aspects of the discussion. Thank you again. With this, we come to a close to the panel discussions leg of the FinSec second day. We'll now move to the closing remarks. Would request the audience to move to the main auditorium. Once again, thank you very much to the speakers.
Thank you.
Thank you.